Midwives are also angry about changes in working practices and regrading of staff. The college has warned the ballot will go ahead immediately if the discussions break down. The talks take place on Tuesday and will be closely watched by other health unions for signs of possible compromise from the government. But officials are unlikely to give way on the principle of moving to local pay, which ministers say is the best way to reward staff. A ballot of nearly 30,000 GPs is going ahead today over whether to accept a new government pay offer for out-of-hours work. If they reject it, then family doctors will consider some form of sanctions. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Labour has criticised government proposals to set up a new House of Commons committee to consider in detail Lord Nolan's recommendations for tough new rules restricting MPs' behaviour. The opposition says the proposal announced at the end of last night's debate on the Nolan report could turn out to be a delaying tactic. Earlier, the government had indicated it would accept Nolan's recommendations on ministers, civil servants and quangos.
It was only at the very end of a debate in which a succession of Conservative MPs had argued against restrictions on outside interests and earnings that it became clear what the government planned to do next. The proposal was that a committee of MPs should consider the Nolan recommendations in detail.
Decisions in principle won't mean very much without the detail. It's only when the detail has been worked out that practical changes can occur, and in my view, the sooner we get on with it, the better.
When I pressed Tony Newton, he was unable to say whether the remit of this committee would be to implement the Nolan report or to consider it. If it's to consider it, then it clearly is a tactical device for delay in order to appease the Tory right-wingers who are clearly not wanting to be constrained by the Nolan recommendations.
It was always going to be difficult for the Commons as a whole to work out a detailed response to Nolan, but referring the recommendations of one committee to another committee has inevitably exposed the government to accusations of delay. Mr Newton will now face pressure to set a tight timetable for the new committee. Tim Fenton, BBC News, Westminster.
Labour's Deputy Leader John Prescott has urged voters in Wales to declare the country a Tory-free zone. He was speaking in Llandudno as delegates gathered for the Welsh Labour Party Conference. The Labour leader, Tony Blair, who will address the conference today, will launch a sustained attack on the government's record. Later, the delegates are expected to endorse the party's proposals for a Welsh Assembly.
If Labour are in a buoyant mood generally, in Wales they're positively bubbling, having driven the Tories out of their last Welsh council in the local elections a fortnight ago. But Tony Blair's message here today will be that local elections don't win general elections, and the Labour leadership is warning against complacency.
We've been in opposition for far too long. We'll not be lulled into complacency. We're working hard on the details of those policies that we'll put to the electorate. We have to earn their trust to win the election, and that's what we intend to do.
Mr Prescott was speaking at an eve of conference rally where he nearly took a tumble. No such hitches are expected in today's vote on Labour's policy for a Welsh Assembly without tax-raising powers, though some delegates are expected to call for a more powerful body. Tim Hirsch, BBC News, Llandudno.
The Sinn Fein President, Gerry Adams, has welcomed the Northern Ireland Secretary, Sir Patrick Mayhew's statement that he would like to meet him for talks when they both attend a White House conference next week in Washington. Speaking after a book signing session in Philadelphia, Gerry Adams called once again for the government to take a leadership role in the peace process.
Well, we need, as I've said, to move to all-party talks. We're interested in not just symbolism, but in substance, and I think it's an indication of the open-door policy pursued by President Clinton that we're able to move in this way. I hope John Major will emulate that example, and I'm looking forward to putting these views to Patrick Mayhew and listening to his views and moving the entire situation towards a lasting peace settlement.
The Royal Navy frigate HMS Brilliant's been involved in a rescue operation off the coast of Dorset. A man was pulled from the sea last night after falling overboard from a German ship 13 miles off Portland Bill. The man was picked up after spending an hour in the water. He was suffering from cold but was not seriously injured.
A national survey of people who've used the civil courts suggests that 4 people out of 5 wish their disputes had been resolved in a different way. The survey was carried out for the BBC programme Law in Action and the National Consumer Council. It found that 3/4 of those who'd been involved in a serious legal dispute thought the law was too slow and complicated.
Around 5 million people in England and Wales have been involved in a serious legal dispute over the past 3 years. That's 1 adult in 8. Around 3/4 of them think the law is too slow, too complicated, and too easy to twist if you know the rules. Only 1/4 of those questioned thought the system was fair and usually produced the right result. People who've been involved in a serious civil dispute, such as divorce, problems at work, car accidents, or unpaid debt, were then asked how their case should have been resolved. Only 8% were happy with a full trial in court. Nearly 1/4 wanted to sit round a table with their opponents and let an independent expert make a decision. And just over half preferred a round-table meeting with their opponents where an independent expert would help them reach an agreement among themselves.
What they show is that the basic assumptions on which the civil justice system is currently based are called into question, particularly in relation to trials and to financial compensation. As presently constituted, the civil justice system appears to assume that people want to go to trial, full trial, and that people want financial compensation. And that isn't actually the case. Over 50% of our respondents said they would have been very happy to sit round a table with an independent expert as an alternative form of dispute resolution.
Lord Wolfe, the law lord, will soon be recommending major changes in the civil justice system. Today's survey shows that the people who use the civil courts are far from happy with the way things are. Joshua Rosenberg, BBC News.
People who use sunbeds run the risk of getting skin cancer, according to a report out today in the medical journal The Lancet. It highlights the dangers of using sunbeds too often and for too long. Some doctors are now calling for them to carry a health warning.
The search for the perfect tan from a sunbed is something that has seduced around 1/5 of Britain's adult population at one time or another. Most beds use ultraviolet A light. Until now, many experts have believed that anything up to 20 sessions a year are relatively safe. But writing in today's issue of The Lancet, the government senior medical officer implies any exposure on a sunbed is unsafe. Andrew Bullman says there's thought to be no threshold for the risk induced by radiation from sunbeds. That view is supported by other doctors who say beds should now carry a health warning.
It would be nice to have some clear statements, some clear public statements saying that these machines can damage your health. I think it's a free country, and I think to try and have an out-and-out ban might not be very sensible, but I think we need to inform people and then they can vote with their feet and stop using them.
Cancer of the skin is the fastest growing form of cancer in Britain. Around 1,000 people die each year from it. But those using sunbeds to get that just been on holiday look say the risks are still small.
I think the chances of me getting skin cancer are just so remote that it wouldn't bother me. I'd put it to the back of my mind.
If I truly felt that I was going to get cancer of the skin through doing this, I would stop. If I honestly believed it.
The sunbed industry says that used in moderation and under instruction, this is a safe way to tan. But today's warning casts more doubt on the wisdom of electronic sun searching. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News.
The American actress Elizabeth Montgomery, best known for her role in the 1960s series Bewitched, has died at her home in Los Angeles. She was 57 and had been suffering from cancer. In the programme, she played the young witch Samantha, who could make magical things happen by twitching her nose, much to the annoyance of her husband Darren.
And the Russian ballet star Alexander Godunov has died at his home in Hollywood. He was 45. Godunov made headlines around the world when he defected to the United States while on tour with the Bolshoi Ballet in 1979. He later became an actor, starring in several films, including Die Hard and Witness.
It is 11 minutes past 8 and Adam Shaw is back with the latest market news. Adam.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Good morning. Well, on Wall Street, shares took their biggest tumble for more than 6 months last night. It was due to worries about the ballooning US trade deficit and the slowing economy there. The Dow Jones actually closed at 4,340, 81 points weaker. The dollar hasn't escaped unscathed either, falling back significantly against the pound, German mark and Japanese yen. Against that Japanese currency, it now stands at 86.98, down around half a yen. Meanwhile, against the German mark, it stands at 144.23, also weaker by 1.53 pfennigs. The pound has risen on that dollar weakness as well. It's now trading against the US currency at 157.63, up over 1 1/5 cents. Although it has to be said, against the German mark, the pound's performance hasn't been impressive. It's now trading against the Deutsche Mark at 226.94. That's down almost 1 1/3 pfennigs. Now, problems with share prices weren't the sole concern of New York. A drop in futures prices started a bout of selling in the Tokyo cash market. The Nikkei closed down 171 points at 16,140. The 16,000 level now well in its sights. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, where trading still underway, the Hang Seng now stands at 8,980, weaker by 135 points. And finally, on our own doorstep, the FTSE index stands at 3,259. Quite an amazing move for this time of morning. Normally it's down around 1 point. It is off 26 points in the first few minutes of trade. Of course, we'll keep you up to date with all of that. But now back to Andrew.
Thank you. Dramatic news from Adam. Now let's have a look at today's front pages and total agreement among the broadsheets, which all lead with Parliament's reaction to the Nolan report. The Guardian describes a fierce Conservative backbench counterattack against proposals requiring MPs to disclose their earnings from consultancies. Its photograph shows Lord Nolan being, as the paper puts it, harangued by the Tory MP Alan Duncan before yesterday's Commons debate.
The Daily Telegraph sees the backlash as being damaging for the Prime Minister. It quotes a senior Conservative as saying that Mr Major had created a Frankenstein's monster which he couldn't control.
The Sun reports that a copycat angel of death is being hunted after an elderly hospital patient was given a massive overdose of insulin. The incident happened at the same Lincolnshire hospital where the nurse Beverly Allett murdered 4 children.
In its first edition, the Daily Express's lead story reports that an illegal immigrant who was jailed yesterday can keep the £1 million he made at the taxpayer's expense. The paper says the man made his million by handling more than 1,000 bogus political asylum claims and arranging more than 650 fake marriages.
The Times reports that the mother of an adopted child has won her campaign for the same maternity leave rights as a natural parent. Janet Alderson's victory over her employers, ICI, is being seen as a landmark, with implications for all working women who adopt children.
And finally, The Independent highlights prehistoric research by scientists in California. They've managed to revive microbes which were trapped inside the intestines of fossilized insects for up to 130 million years. The researchers say their work eclipses even the fictional exploits portrayed in the film Jurassic Park.
It's almost 8:15. You're watching the BBC's Breakfast News. This morning's headlines. The Royal College of Midwives has decided to suspend its ballot on industrial action. There are to be new talks with the NHS next week. The Labour Party has accused the government of giving way to backbench anger over Lord Nolan's proposals for regulating the conduct of MPs. And a report out today says that tanning your skin on a sunbed could damage your health.
Well, the news that the Royal College of Midwives is to start talks with the NHS about pay is the first sign of hope in what's become an increasingly bitter dispute. Like the nurses, the midwives are opposing a national pay offer of 1%, with up to 2% to be negotiated locally. Liz McKean spent the day with a community midwife in Kent to see why they're so fed up.
An aqua aerobics class for new mothers. It's as much a part of modern midwifery as the delivery of babies.
Keep that tummy in.
In her 22 years as a midwife, Linda Burrows has seen the profession assume more and more responsibility. She says morale has taken a corresponding ducking.
Each time we see a woman, be it in labour or antenatally, we're actually looking after 2 lives each time. We do a lot more midwifery care. So therefore, we're giving the women complete midwifery care without them having to visit hospitals, etc. Morning, Linda here. Okay, thank you.
The day begins with a list of the mums-to-be that need visiting at home. Midwives are involved with them from the moment they know they're pregnant till at least 10 days after their babies are born. Such commitment is central to government guidelines on childbirth.
Because of changing childbirth, women's expectations, I feel, are higher. So you have a responsibility to be able to give the women, hopefully, an informed choice, give them what they want in childbirth.
Is it harder being a midwife these days?
I think so, because you have more responsibility. On the community, you have total responsibility. So, yes, it is much harder.
Jo Weeks is a fortnight away from giving birth. Her blood pressure is up and needs close monitoring.
Sometimes when it turns round, it does make you feel quite queasy, so, and that's very hard down there.
Linda will decide when and if Jo needs hospital care.
It's very reassuring to have the midwife there. It always comes out to see you. If you don't feel well, you can just ring the midwife up and the midwife will come and see you. You haven't got to go out.
And you think they're worth more money then?
Definitely.
The support of the women in their care is certainly strengthening the midwives' resolve, although they insist that any industrial action should not upset the patients.
I'm dedicated. I love being a midwife, and I couldn't leave midwifery. You know, I know I couldn't. But I don't think I'm really militant as such. I don't think any midwives really are. Hello, Samaya, come in.
Linda finishes the day at an antenatal clinic. She says midwives are ready to withdraw goodwill and work to rule.
That's perfect, isn't it? Nice and loud. That's reassuring.
Barring nighttime call-outs, her day is almost over. But if concessions can't be won from the government, she believes that for this traditionally conservative profession, a bitter dispute is only just beginning. Liz McKean, BBC News, Maidstone.
Well, joining me now is the General Secretary of the Royal College of Midwives, Juliet Allison. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
No working to rule at the moment. You've decided to have talks instead. Why?
Because the offer has been made. Obviously, when one embarks upon this sort of action, the end result you hope will be talks, and the talks have been offered to us. So we're taking that option.
In fact, if you'd held the ballot and you'd opted for some kind of industrial action, that would have made your position even stronger going into talks, wouldn't it?
No, I don't agree that it would have. I mean, that is a road that I did not wish to embark upon, and I certainly know that midwives didn't wish to embark upon. But the conditions for midwives have deteriorated so much over the last 2 years that a stand had to be made.
So you've opted for talks. Do you see some hope?
I do see some hope. The agenda setting meeting will be on Tuesday, and on my agenda will be issues of midwives being downgraded and losing jobs. We want a pay structure for midwives which reflects their level of responsibility, and we want to talk about putting resources into midwifery services.
Well, of course, that agenda-setting session might be the first problem, mightn't it? Because the Department of Health say the talks will be held within the context of local pay. And that's not what you want to talk about, is it?
We were opposed to local pay yesterday, and we remain opposed to local pay
so
today.
If they come along and they say it's about local pay, what happens?
Well, I can't preempt what's going to happen on Tuesday, obviously, and you don't expect me to. We will go on Tuesday and talk with them. The discussions will begin on Tuesday.
But the point is, if they do stick to the context of local pay, it means they can't talk about national pay levels.
You're asking me now to preempt the talks, and I think that the triumph for us, we feel at the moment, is that we've actually got the NHS to sit down and talk to us.
OK, well that is rather odd in itself, because at the same time the Department of Health has threatened nurses that they'll actually, or they're thinking of abolishing their pay review body. They're saying that to the nurses, at the same time saying to you, come and have talks.
Yes, the pay review body is the same pay review body for us, and I would support the Royal College of Nursing that the pay review body should not be abolished.
So is the government, do you think, trying to drive a wedge between the two of you?
I would not have thought so. The Royal College of Nursing represents the nurses of the United Kingdom, and my job is to look after the midwives of the United Kingdom.
But you're optimistic at this stage?
I'm optimistic at this stage.
Juliet Allison, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
It is 21 minutes past 8. I'm just sidling into shot very neatly, I thought.
Shuffling forward.
Adam Minot, causing a stir every time you come on today.
It's all go, isn't it, in sport? The former world heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson will announce next week who will be his first opponent since his release from prison in March. It's expected he'll return to the ring in August. Tyson, released in March after serving a 3-year prison sentence for rape, hasn't fought since beating Donovan Razor Ruddock in June 1991. A rift between winger Andrei Kanchelskis and manager Alex Ferguson has clouded Manchester United's build-up to tomorrow's FA Cup final against Everton. Kanchelskis says he wants to leave the club because he can't work for Ferguson anymore. Everton may not be the favourites at Wembley tomorrow, but they will be hoping to deprive United of another trophy after their failure to win the Premiership.
It's not very often that the FA Cup has been seen as a consolation prize, but should Manchester United end tomorrow afternoon with a win at Wembley, that's exactly what it will be. Coming less than a week after they handed their Premiership crown to Blackburn Rovers, the FA Cup final offers United their last chance of glory this season.
You get a little bit spoilt with success, you know, and then you think it's just going to happen for you. And sometimes when you get a little kick where it hurts, it shakes you up a little bit. And I think it happened to us two years ago when we lost the league to Leeds, and we've bounced back since. And as I say, we only have to wait a week later now to put it all right, and we finish off the season with the FA Cup. And again, we've had a terrific season.
The last time United faced Everton in an FA Cup final was in 1985. An intensely close game settled in extra time by United's Norman Whiteside. However, Everton's poor league form this year makes a similarly close encounter unlikely.
That was the nagging worry as we approach Wembley, that you know, we wouldn't have enough points to survive, and that would have taken the real shine off the whole occasion had we gone down. But no, since a week last Tuesday, you know, where we've won, the atmosphere has been a lot more relaxed now that we know, that we've finally escaped relegation, and we can now turn our thoughts and concentrate to this Saturday.
But they say nothing succeeds like success, of which United have had plenty. None but the brave would bet against them. Terry Badu, BBC News.
Jürgen Klinsmann finally bid farewell to English soccer at the Football Writers' Dinner in London last night. The German international received his Footballer of the Year award before returning home to play for Bayern Munich. Klinsmann said Tottenham supporters sympathised with his decision to leave.
They all told me that they can understand my decision, and they told me also that they're a bit disappointed and a bit sad about it, but they say if you have the chance to finish your career back home in Germany and to play in a team which for sure will play for the title in Germany and maybe also a good role in Europe, that showed me actually that they understood my decision.
And we have more sport shortly before 9 o'clock.
Adam, thank you very much indeed. Now, what about the weather today? Or more important, what about the weather for the weekend? Ian McCaskill.
Thank you, Andrew. The weekend on the whole isn't bad, but rain will move into western districts during Sunday. Let's have a look at what's happening today, which is slightly more complicated. There's a band of showers coming down across England at the moment. There's another band of rain coming down into northern parts of Scotland with sunshine in between. Close-up look at that satellite picture, you'll see that band moving southwards, and it is giving rain. You can see those showers on the radar drifting southwards over England, Wales, and that next area coming into the far north of Scotland now. This is the way the computer handles it. It takes that band quite quickly southwards away from England and Wales and brings that gradually southwards across Scotland towards the borders and Northern Ireland by this evening. So that's the position now. Southern England and East Anglia are having cloud and showery rain at the moment, and there's sunshine and showers over Northern Ireland and southern Scotland and the borders. The north of Scotland more cloudy with outbreaks of rain. Now that rain in the Northern Isles will turn to snow for a time this afternoon and evening before clearing away. But by then the showers will have cleared southern England, and England and Wales will have a bright and often sunny end to the day, and still those showers over Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland. A degree or so warmer than it has been, 12 or 13 over Scotland and Northern Ireland, that's 55 Fahrenheit. England and Wales, well, 12 on the coasts, but 14 or 15 inland, 57 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit, and not too windy. A band of cloud coming down across Scotland towards Northern Ireland tonight. A touch of frost in the far north of Scotland, 3 Celsius there, but elsewhere a chilly night, but not particularly frosty, 5 or 6 Celsius. A much better day tomorrow with broken clouds and sunshine at times, and several degrees warmer in most places too, but rain moving into western districts during the course of Sunday. But most of Sunday, for most of us, a decent sort of day. Rather a complicated summary of today's rather showery weather, but a bright end to the south of Britain. That's it.
Thank you very much. Later in this morning's breakfast news, as the political rows continue over the Nolan Committee recommendations, we'll be talking to the Minister for Open Government, David Hunt.
And the right to bear arms, America's gun lobby, is under fire. But first, the news, the travel and the weather in your area.
Good morning from Newsroom South-East.
A family from Zaire are being tested at a North London hospital to see if they've contracted the deadly Ebola virus. The Department of Health says an adult and 2 children became unwell during a visit to immigration officials in Croydon after arriving on a flight from Moscow. It's believed the family are at a high-security isolation unit at Coppetswood Hospital in Muswell Hill. Health officials say it's unlikely they've got the infection, but they're being kept under observation. Residents in Greenwich have voted to take court action over traffic pollution in the south-east London borough. They're trying to force councillors to close one of the most congested roads in the area.
Campaigners brought their children to last night's meeting to demonstrate their concern about the high levels of traffic pollution. A recent survey showed midday ozone levels 2.5 times the government's safety standards. Greenwich also has the highest childhood asthma rate in the south-east. Campaigners believe there's a link and say if the council won't act, they'll take them to court.
Local people are now beginning to bring their own actions from their own community groups and bring pressure to bear to force central and local government to act.
A council spokesman said although they sympathise with residents, officials don't believe the problem can be solved locally. They believe most of the pollution comes from Europe.
A consumers group is appealing to the public for help to protect trees in suburban streets which they say are being destroyed by careless cabling work. It's claimed thousands of trees are being killed off.
Mature trees felled in a typical suburban street. This was the scene at Hornchurch in Essex last year, after contractors laying the UK's rapidly expanding cable TV network finished the job. The local council say they had to remove the trees because their roots were damaged. Today, the Consumers Association is demanding legislation to prevent any further destruction. The association says as many as 9 out of 10 street trees are being damaged by such work. It's calling on the public to seek assurances from cabling companies that trees on their doorsteps will be protected.
We'll now look at this morning's travel situation and starting off with the roads. Major problems in south-east London because an office block is on fire in Southwark Street. Elsewhere on the M25 in Chertsey, junction 11 anti-clockwise, that's still closed. Nearby routes are heavily congested. Traffic is at a snail's pace and it's now affecting the A3. Traffic is also at a standstill at the junction 10 of the M25. And on the A13 at Dagenham, an accident on Lodge Avenue at Ripple Road leads to London-bound delays. And on the Underground, on the Northern Line, Clapham Common Station will be closed until at least 10 a.m. That's because of flooding. Look at the weather forecast. Rather cloudy with showers developing through the morning. This afternoon drier with temperatures reaching 15 Celsius. And that's it for the moment. We're back again with you in half an hour's time.
Good morning, it's just coming up to 8:30. Welcome if you've just joined us. This morning, main stories. The Royal College of Midwives has decided to suspend its ballot on industrial action after the Department of Health offered to start talks on pay. Discussions will begin next week. Like other health workers, the midwives had rejected the government's recent pay offer. 2 months ago, the college abandoned its no-strike policy.
The ballot was intended to seek approval from midwives for industrial action short of striking, such as working to rule and withdrawing goodwill. Although, like the nursing unions, they say they would never take action which would damage patient care. Now, exploratory discussions are to be held with NHS officials. The talks take place on Tuesday and will be closely watched by other health unions for signs of possible compromise from the government.
Labour has accused the government of giving in to pressure from Conservative backbenchers over the Nolan Committee's recommendations on MPs' conduct. It says the government's plan, announced late last night to set up a committee of senior MPs to consider the Nolan recommendations, could simply be a delaying tactic.
It was only at the very end of a debate in which a succession of Conservative MPs had argued against restrictions on outside interests and earnings that it became clear what the government planned to do next. The proposal was that a committee of MPs should consider the Nolan recommendations in detail.
When I pressed Tony Newton, he was unable to say whether the remit of this committee would be to implement the Nolan report or to consider it.
It was always going to be difficult for the Commons as a whole to work out a detailed response to Nolan, but referring the recommendations of one committee to another committee has inevitably exposed the government to accusations of delay. Mr Newton will now face pressure to set a tight timetable for the new committee.
The Sinn Fein President, Gerry Adams, has welcomed yesterday's statement by Sir Patrick Mayhew, the Northern Ireland Secretary, that he would like to meet for talks next week when they're both in Washington for a conference at the White House. Speaking after a book signing in Philadelphia, Gerry Adams called once again for the government to take a leadership role in the peace process. The Royal Navy